Contrary for Week 8, the DFS show that's unafraid to give you the most controversial opinions from the darkest recesses of our mind, the opinions of everybody else too ashamed to give. We have no shame here on this show, and that is what my MO is in every walk of life. I'm Chris Spags, joined as always by the founder of Osmo.com, the top DFS player in the world, and once again, just an all-around great guy, Alex Baker. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing well, man. Definitely looking forward to some heated debate this week because, you can introduce him, but we've had some exchanges on Twitter, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes.
The little teaser there from the boss man. But yes, we do have one of the minds behind airyards.com, one of the innovators in the field really driving that forward. I guess you don't want to take full credit, but I'll give you full credit. Josh Hermsmeyer at Frisco Josh on Twitter. How you doing, Josh?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. And Alex. I mean, all that stuff on Twitter, our beef and everything, that was mainly through Evan Silva. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I meant maybe 30% of it, but it was pretty. It was pretty good last year. I had some fun debating with you.
That's right. I mean, Evan at one point was like, "We gotta go out and take you on in some sort of competition or something," but it never went anywhere, unfortunately, because that would have been gold.
That would have been amazing because I think my partner was Pete Manzanelli. It was Pete Overzet, so we would have had some fun doing some drunk Olympics or whatever the heck he had planned for us.
You can always count on Evan to throw a little gasoline on the fire. We miss the guy here every week on the contrary, doing a great job over at Establish the Run. So go check out what he's been up to. And real fast, quick plug, because I want to ask Josh a few questions before we get into all the slate. But really fast, I want to thank FantasyDraft.com. Of course, they are the official sponsor of On the Contrary. They bring you this show every week. So go check them out right now at FantasyDraft.com right now. They're the official home of rake-free DFS. A lot of sites out there. You're paying a ton of rake. And Alex, I'll ask you the question every week. With all the money that you've given towards the DFS sites this week, how would you be affected by not having rake in your life across the board?
Yeah, I mean, not having rake is good, but I like winning more when I win, even better. So the main thing is that this extra percentage, which is usually 12% rake that you're usually paying, totally gets erased from the prize pool. They're awarding that amount of prizes to you, and that means whatever you cash, you're going to win more money on Fantasy Draft than any other site.
And for new players especially, it's important to build that bankroll, and having no rake in your life is going to help that out quite a bit. So go to FantasyDraft.com right now and use the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your free 7-day trial in the world of rake-free DFS. And check out the Hooters main event, their big tournament every week, which a lot of people are doing great with, including Alex and our own Share My Money as well. So you guys have done really well over at FantasyDraft.com. And my dog is really loving the Fantasy Draft plugs back there. So that's good. But Josh, I want to turn it back to you because you did create airyards.com. You do work for 538. You also do work for Establish the Run. And I think you're one of the most, one of the top, probably most engaged Twitter followers out there because you have a brusque way about yourself, but you also bring data to the people that perhaps sometimes they don't want to hear. I guess, how did you get to this spot where you are such an important figure in the Twitter landscape and truly a generational talent in your own right?
Wow. Well, see, I'll take the generational talent part. I don't know about the rest, but I think I like trolling on Twitter, but I like it good-natured. Good-natured trolling. Mean trolling and mean trolls are just, they're bullies and they're jerks, and I don't want anything to do with that. But I think good-natured trolling is a lot of fun, and so I don't know. I do this for fun. We all do it for fun. We want to be entertained. Sports should be entertaining, and I think that's kind of how I approach my interactions on Twitter. But in terms of like air yards and all this stuff, man, you mentioned it. It didn't originate with me. It's a stat. It's not something you can invent. People chart it, and Elias has been charting it since 2009, and Brian Burke named it. The only thing I kind of contributed was that I thought it was important to help us be better fantasy players. And the fact that has kind of taken over and that people accept it as a useful stat in that domain, I think makes me happy. And I think, mission accomplished on that. And I'm definitely happy about that.
So you're playing with a lot of data, and obviously Alex is as well. We all are here because we do have to know that about as well as anybody for doing all the content we do across NFL, NBA, MLB, all the sports. But Josh, you're a level beyond, I think, with your data analysis. And I know you're also a person who likes to poke holes in kind of the tropes that people have or the well-held theories that people have about various things. Is there something particular that you hear from people regularly that you see data-wise and you're like, this is just stupid? Like, why is this a trope that people always bring to me on Twitter?
It's actually almost always to do with splits. We narrow down our sample to something that probably doesn't have any real significant differences, and because of that, probably no predictive value. And so I think, sometimes we'll read a lot into certain matchups and splits that are just small sample size issues. And I think what you're really doing is you're saying, I've analyzed this game, and I think there are some legitimate reasons based on my, deep knowledge and understanding, my domain knowledge of the game. These things should happen based on my intuition and my past experience. But I don't think the data helps you with those arguments. And I think that's where things kind of, when people accuse, quant guys like us of actually making the stats say whatever we want, I think those are the positions where they're actually correct. And so I kind of push back against it as best I can, because I do think there are ways to abuse statistics just to fit narratives.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Alex, you're a data man too, I guess. Is there anything that you see? And I know you mentioned a little bit of a joking, obviously tongue-in-cheek kind of beef that you and Josh had on Twitter at one point. Is there anything you see data-wise that I guess maybe you and Josh can find a kinship here? Because on the contrary, is really about bringing people together.
Yeah, Josh, as contrary as I came in here expecting to be, I mean, I'd give you a fist bump right now if I could, because you said it pretty well. Like the splits, I always find those pretty unconvincing arguments, because what you're doing, you're taking a lot of data that exists and totally disregarding it, saying it's not relevant, when we know every piece that has some importance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to talk about a lot of throughout this hour, a lot of data throughout this hour. And of course, you can get even more at your fingertips, some of the most important data at awesemo.com/join, and use that promo code Contrary for half off your first month. All the ownership projections we've referenced throughout this week, or throughout the show rather, are going to be on there, as well as Alex's own player projections. So there's a lot of things. If you want to get into Alex's head, this show, the other shows Alex does on Sunday mornings rather, and of course the data we have at awesemo.com/join is the best way to get in there. But Alex, let's get in your head, and Josh as well. Let's get into everybody's head here. Starting off with, I went with a weird game to open with, but the ownership seems like it's going to push people there. Oakland at Houston. Looks like it'll be a fairly popular game this week. Fairly high ownership for Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and Kenny Stills will be taking over those Will Fuller routes. And Oakland should also see a lot of ownership for Darren Waller if he went nuts last week as a chalk play in week 7. So I guess I'll ask you, Alex, first. As a chalk game, is this a game that you want to be on, or is it one that you're perhaps looking to get away from?
I like it. I mean, I always have a hard time kind of arguing with the chalk, and this is no exception. I think that Kenny Stills has been he's been good in Houston, and this opportunity with Will Fuller out should open up the door to him being a really good fantasy player. And I don't think his price has quite caught up to the new situation. So I think he's really good. Hopkins also should get a boost, not going on with Fuller, who gets targeted at a little bit higher rate than Stills when he's on the field. And then on Oakland, I mean, the thing about Oakland that's so awesome is that the fantasy value is all concentrated in 3 guys: Tyrell Williams, Darren Waller, and Josh Jacobs. And that makes it really appealing fantasy.
Josh, how are you feeling about this game? Because we want to talk air yards right away. Will Fuller getting that air yards boost, saw 2 deep targets last week after Will Fuller went out. They are running similar routes, and the assumption is that'll take over a lot of the opportunity that Fuller had. So how are you feeling about the Houston offense in particular here and the passing game?
Yeah, I think they brought in Stills for that exact reason. They wanted some redundancy with that stretch X, and he certainly provides it. And it was just kind of hard early on in the season when they were both getting snaps to kind of figure out, who was going to pop, and the model wasn't having trouble with them. But in terms of this week, there's nothing in the stats that I look at that make me think that the chalk is wrong, and there's really nothing that makes me think that there's a contrarian play here or a reason to fade. So this just looks like one of those, interesting games where Stills at his price is probably worth paying up for, just because of the new opportunity he's going to see. But you're projecting him into a role. He doesn't actually have the data backing up, kind of this chalkiness that he's getting. So there is a projection involved, but I don't think it's a bad one.
Alex, how are you feeling about DeAndre Hopkins here? Because he's a player who did see a little more opportunity last week when Fuller went out. It did seem like they were trying to force the ball his way. Not a data point, just more of an eye observation thing. But you'd assume that he would see more of a target share without Fuller out there. Stills can't take over the full load, but maybe he and Kiki QT can combine to do it. But how are you feeling about Hopkins? Because his ownership seems like it's going to be extremely high, and maybe somebody that could be worth getting away from just from that reason.
I think there's some guesswork involved here, because we haven't really seen what's going to happen with Fuller out. This season, the Texans have been running a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. now that they have more talent at the position and more healthy bodies. They still have 3 guys that are pretty good, with Kiki Kuti kind of filling out the squad. And if they plan to run out the same strategy, maybe it won't affect Hopkins that much, but it is a good matchup. There is a chance, though, that maybe they don't like Kiki Kuti as much, and they'll go back to some 2 wide sets, which should give Hopkins 4 targets.
Josh, I'm going to ask you a question about Darren Waller because he is an important player this week. Last week, he went off. I was completely wrong on him last week. I actually, throughout the course of the week, kind of soured on him when Terrell Williams went out. I figured that he would just see more defensive attention. It turned out to be the opposite, where he had the biggest day in history. So I'll wear that one like a badge of pride and shame at the same time. But Darren Waller, more of a close-range target, a guy who's been seeing a ton of opportunity, over 8 targets a game. Is there any reason at all why you would be, maybe looking away from him in tournaments this week, given the fact that people are going to be on him, and also the defenses you'd assume would smarten up a bit to him?
Yeah, you guys have him projected at a really high ownership, and because of just the inherent volatility of the tight end position, that might give me pause. I don't really think there's a huge problem with paying up for the chalk at tight end this year, though. I mean, it's just such a wasteland, and that Carr and Gruden are going to scheme lots of plays for him just because that's what we've seen. I mean, the evidence is there. So yeah, I think my whole, and I don't play DFS as much as I used to. I have to VPN into California to even get a lineup set because I live up in Idaho. But my general take is that you pay up for chalk almost everywhere, but wide receiver, and then take the low end guys there. So I wouldn't have a problem with it. I like Waller this week. I think he'll be fine. I don't know that he's going to return much value, but I think he is a good play.
All right, that sounds good. And Alex, let me ask you one quick question, because I know this guy has historically been one of your better projected plays. Came out today, Josh Jacobs currently questionable. Perhaps Jalen Richard in the mix for you as a cheap play who could see some more work?
Yeah, I think latest news on Josh Jacobs is that he's likely to play. I could be wrong, but if he does, I think that he makes a decent play, but his price has gone up to kind of account for the fact that he's getting such a big workload in Oakland. If he's out, probably DeAndre Washington would be worth a look as the backup. Jalen Richard, and the Raiders' kind of history has kept the same role regardless of kind of like who's in, who's out. So I'd be hesitant to really project too much of an increase in workload there.
All right, let's keep going here. And guys, hit that like button, because all the information we talk about throughout the next hour will only be as good as the amount of likes we get. So direct correlation play right there. So help us out. Hit that like button before we continue on here. Let's move on to the Giants game at Detroit. Ty Johnson going to be a value play du jour this week. With the ownership not totally there, but Kerryon Johnson on the IR for the year. Should see more opportunity going his way. But the Detroit pass game, as well as the Giants pass game, not in a bad spot. 2 pass defenses that have given up some production on the year. Alex, I'll ask you first. How are you feeling about this game as a game stack? Because we did see last week, Detroit can give up a lot of volume to teams that are willing to pass. And Daniel Jones, not great, but he does have the weapons around him.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the Detroit stack have a ton of upside this year with 4 good players to choose from, with Marvin Jones, Amendola, Galladay, and Hawkinson. Kind of mix and match there. And when you have a matchup with the Giants, that's amazing because their defense is pretty weak. Josh, I know you might think it doesn't matter, but I mean, the bottom line is Detroit is projected to score 27 points this week. That's very high for them, so this is a clear boom spot. And Giants have some really good fantasy assets as well to run it back with, because Sterling Shepard's out. That opens up more work for Tate and Slayton, as well as Ingram and Barkley just being among the top at their position.
Josh, how are you feeling about this game? Because you have a lot of guys here. Some of them will fit that air yards criteria. Some of them just good players who maybe you're getting some of those short range targets like Danny Amendola. How are you feeling about the weapons here for Detroit first? Let's talk about them. Which receiver do you want to go to? Because it does kind of seem like Kenny Galladay might be due for things to swing back his way.
Yeah, I think that after the huge blow-up game and just a kind of the dearth of targets sent Galladay's way, I think they're going to want to, just as a kind of a schematic strategy, to actually get him more involved, and probably early. And then if they move away from it because the other team takes away Galladay, that's a completely different thing. If the Giants are able to do that, that would be fantastic for them. I doubt that defenses will be able to do that if they decide to feed Galladay. So yeah, I would say Galladay. I think on the other side of the ball, though, Evan Ingram is a buy low this week, and my only hesitation does have to do with defense, and the only reason why it would have to do with defense is the connection between Belichick, what he was able to do to Jones and Patricia. They do have similar defensive philosophies. He obviously watches Belichick's tape. If he is able to replicate and cause a lot of trouble for Jones, then I think that spells probably continued struggles for Evan Ingram. But I do think that Jones and the Giants are going to want to get Ingram involved this week.
So do we think the Ingram thing, because it did jump out to me last week, and I thought actually it would benefit Ingram. It turned out not to, but Arizona blitzes at a really high rate, one of the highest blitz rates in the league. Detroit not blitzing at all. Blitzing just, actually, was that right? Yeah, 13% of the time. So really low. I guess, Josh, I'll ask you first, because this is probably more relevant to your interests. Do you think Detroit's going to get pressure on Jones? Because it seems like they really haven't tried to bring much pressure overall.
No, I think they're a conservative offense that plays two gap. They aren't trying to attack upfield, and they're really just trying to keep things in front of them and take away the other team's best player, a lot like what Belichick tries to do. Some games, Patricia's really good at it. Some games he looks like a genius, right? Like someone you would expect to have come from the Belichick coaching tree. Other games, like last week, he just looks terrible and doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what to expect. I don't know how they're going to game plan for the Giants. And I guess that's really why I come down with my whole defense doesn't matter, is because you can be super sharp. You can think through every option, think you have the right play, but and then at the end of the day, when the first punch is thrown, everyone's plan changes, and now you're left just betting on the broad probabilities, which are the targets and the air yards that you've seen historically.
That might have been the first Mike Tyson quote we've ever had it on the contrary. So that's hopefully we can aspire to more. I'm sure he's got a lot more out there that'd be good to bring to the old verbal Rolodex. Alex, I'm going to ask you about Ty Johnson here, because the ownership for him has come up a bit to 14%, not as high as you might think, given the fact that he is a value play. A lot of season-long players clamoring for him across leagues across the country, but DFS perhaps not getting there all the way. How are you feeling about Ty Johnson in this spot, given that he's kind of getting the rep as a replacement level player, but we saw replacement level players do better, or similarly well, rather, in other spots, like Wayne Gallman this year kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, what to do with Ty Johnson this week is quite the mystery. I could use Mike Tyson's help figuring this out.
The poet laureate, Mike Tyson.
Yeah, so I think last week we actually got a good data point here for what they do with Kerryon Johnson out. And Ty Johnson kind of assumed all of Kerryon Johnson's duties. I think that that's not necessarily a lock, because J.D. McKissic is kind of lurking around as the better pass-catching back. And I think that it might be reasonable to see him take a little bit more of the work than if Kerryon Johnson was starting. But all that together makes Ty Johnson a nice play, especially given the matchup. It is kind of a different price across the industry. DraftKings at $4,900, he's kind of expensive, but on FanDuel at $5,200, he's relatively cheap. So I'm going to vary my strategy based on the site.
Josh, is there anything that you've ever observed about running backs, and when the lead back comes out, who's kind of the bell cow back, and how the backup then comes in, and people always expect the role to be 1-to-1, but it's very rarely 1-to-1, perhaps in some cases like Chase Edmunds last week. But is there everything you've seen with that? And I guess, how is your comfort level with Ty Johnson?
I think it's pretty high. And there was actually someone just did some research and put it out on Twitter. And he was looking at basically the efficiency of backs when the first goes out, the lead back goes out due to injury and effectiveness, and the next one comes in. And even with star backs, the efficiency stays relatively the same. That isn't to say that they're equal talents. It's just to say that that's rushing. That's just how rushing works. It's a very narrow distribution of outcomes. And if you give a guy the volume, then he's likely to put up similar numbers, just because you're getting between 1 and 4 yards per carry, maybe 5 sometimes. So absent a big long run, you're going to have similar production. The question is, do teams pivot from the run when their lead back goes out? And I think that's what you actually see. Although, as you pointed out, with a team like Arizona and Chase Edmunds, they spread to run. And if the other team decides to heavily defend the run, or the pass, you're going to have a guy get a lot of opportunities. In this case, I think I tend to think he's going to get limited carries. I think that this is I think the ownership is driven more by the price, not what we're all projecting in terms of opportunity for Ty. But yeah, I guess that's my take.
Yeah, and Paul Perkins also called up from the practice squad too, so they're going to be going with 3 running backs. It looks like between Johnson, McKissick, and Perkins. So we'll see how that shakes out. But it wouldn't shock me if Ty Johnson fell into the end zone twice, because that is the world that we live in. Let's keep going here. We got Seattle at Atlanta. Matt Ryan, now a game time decision. He said he's going to be playing. Coach Dan Quinn seeming like he's not as fully on board with that plan. But I guess there's a big question here is right now the Vegas total still looks good for Seattle. It's come down a bit for Atlanta. Alex, I'll ask you first. Would this game be more appealing to you if Matt Ryan's in there, or is it a void if Matt Ryan isn't in there? I guess would be the more important question.
Yeah, I think it's really appealing. I mean, Matt Ryan has been a big question mark. They haven't released any lines early in the week to kind of set the baseline expectations here because of how questionable he was, but he returned to practice today, so I'm operating with the assumption that he'll be playing. And if he does, I think going to Atlanta again, I mean, is an amazing choice. I have them projected on my top stacks tool of having a 17% chance of being the top stack this week. And that's because not only, I mean, do they throw the ball a ton, they have really concentrated roles for the receivers. They traded Sanu away, so now they have a couple of guys kind of filling in at the third wide receiver. So I think Calvin Ridley and Julio get a little bit of a bump. And then Austin Hooper, of course, is a great tight end play.
Josh, Austin Hooper and Julio Jones have both run routes out of the slot. Really the only guys running routes out of the slot besides Sanu. How are you thinking that breaks down? Because I've seen some reports. I know Justin Hardy, we have projected, I think, overall to be the number 3 guy. Russell Gage is somebody who people have talked about being in the mix, but he hasn't really run those routes yet. How are you thinking that shakes out with the Sanu absence?
Well, I know what I would do. I would stick Julio in the slot as much as possible. He's just devastating from there. I don't know that you can count on Quinn and his team to actually do the right thing, though, and that's, again, part of the problem here. Maybe if Shanahan was still there, you would see some prolific numbers out of this offense again, then actually lead to wins. But I don't know. I would play Julio, obviously. I mean, what do we have him at in terms of ownership projection?
12% on DK, it looks like.
12%. Yeah. So, I mean, look, that's fine. He's like 6th or 7th, and he's 7,700. I think those are good numbers to play Julio. But I think I would not choose to pay up on this slate, given what I've looked at just briefly at wide receiver. I think I would go for some, as you would expect, some of my buy lows.
Josh, how are you feeling about the Seattle passing game here? Because Chris Carson, we have projected to be one of the chalk plays of the week. Atlanta's run defense really been one of the lone kind of decent parts overall, even though, of course, defense doesn't matter. But 3.7 yards per rush allowed, a 77 rush defense grade from PFF for Atlanta. We know about they're really just bad versus the pass. How are you feeling about the pass game versus the run game? Because it looks like the pass game right now not getting quite as much ownership compared to Carson.
Yeah, I would again, and this is just how I would think about the problem if I were Pete Carroll. They're bad at stopping the run, so you would want to gash them early, and then you want to hit DK. Metcalf over the top, he's not been stopped really this year. He's getting open and past people in the second level. So unless they're going to play too deep and really, kind of bend coverage his way, I think he's going to have some shots. And Russell Wilson can put it on him. So, run the ball early, run some play action, and throw the ball to DK Metcalf, and, he could put up some big points this week.
Alex, how are you feeling about the situation here where we have a chalky Chris Carson, a Seattle team that's not terribly owned, but does have some ownership on them, especially Tyler Lockett? What are your most appealing options here between Carson and the pass game? And if you had to choose one, if you had to go Carson or Russell Wilson in some of his targets, which side would you want to be on?
Yeah, I got to take a loss here because last week I was speculating that when Rashad Penny came back, Carson's role would be diminished, but it wasn't. He's still going out there for 20-plus rushes. So I think he makes a nice play in a game where Seattle's a healthy favorite against a team that doesn't offer much on the defensive end. And then Lockett also is going to be a top play this week, I think. Just tremendous efficiency this year so far. And DK Metcalf is kind of maybe a GPP like flyer I'd take.
All right, that makes sense. Let's keep going here. We got an Arizona team heading into New Orleans with Alvin Kamara expected back after Latavius Murray's breakout week, so we'll see if that affects his workload at all. Michael Thomas looks like he'll be a very popular wide receiver play. Drew Brees' status, at least the last that I checked, remains mostly up in the air, but I think the assumption is we'll see Teddy Bridgewater. So, Alex, we know about the pace Arizona brings to the table. We've talked about that pretty much every week on this show. How are you feeling about New Orleans prospects, I guess, and what likelihood would you have it on Brees coming back in? It seems unlikely now, but where are you shaking out with that?
I don't want to speculate too much because injuries really aren't my expertise.
Sure.
But I think that, a matchup with Arizona is pretty ideal. And they got some really good fantasy weapons with Kamara and Thomas. So, those are going to be some guys that I'm really going to that could potentially break a slate this week.
Josh, how are you feeling about New Orleans here? Again, getting some pace. Michael Thomas, some talk that maybe Patrick Peterson may shadow him this week after he didn't do much shadow coverage last year. How are you feeling about Thomas's prospects, especially if Bridgewater's in there with kind of a pop gun arm?
Yeah, I'm still not sold on Bridgewater. He's obviously done great for the team in terms of managing the team and leading them to wins. But Michael Thomas has still put up numbers. The guy is incredible. So I think he's just an every week start if you can squeeze him in. I think the interesting question is about Kamara. I think that you will see him all over the field and lots of targets. I think I don't think Latavius Murray has earned his way into a situation where he can push that guy off the field. So I would say that he's any kind of doubt you might be having about Kamara, I would kind of throw it aside. I think he's going to get tons of touches.
All right, Alex, I'll turn it back to you here because I'm curious your thoughts. David Johnson, I think questionable right now, perhaps trending towards not playing. Chase Edmunds went off last week, looked really good. He's actually looked good all year for the most part. Has had better yards after contact than Johnson on pretty much the same plays they've been running all year, but granted with less volume. But Edmunds looked good. He's a play that I think people would want to be on if we know Johnson is out. So, Alex, how are you feeling about the situation with some question marks going in and also a tough New Orleans defense who's been really strong since Bridgewater took over?
Yeah, New Orleans was actually my top defense for season long, so I really like them going into the season. A lot of that is because they're facing teams like Arizona, who aren't that good at offense. So I think we all got kind of burned last week with David Johnson. They really kept the cards close to the chest or whatever the saying is, and we didn't know that it was going to be Chase Edmunds running out there. I don't think they're going to be able to keep it as much of a secret this week. I think they're going to get pushed a lot more to kind of show what they're doing. So hopefully we'll know, but if David Johnson is out, I think Chase Edmunds is a reasonable play, especially on FanDuel and Yahoo, where he's relatively cheap compared to FantasyDraft and DraftKings. But it is a tough matchup, so I wouldn't be going all out trying to fit him in my lineups.
Josh, how are you feeling about this prospects here for Chase Edmunds, given that his price is up? Well, actually, I didn't realize he's just $200 less than David Johnson on DraftKings and a comparable amount on FantasyDraft. Less of a question on Yahoo and on FanDuel as well. How are you feeling about Edmunds' prospects going against the New Orleans defense? Really stout inside, and Marcus Davenport in particular, just a beast in the middle.
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't be too concerned with their run defense. It's not too terribly predictive week to week, and so what I would look at instead is just how prolific Arizona has been with their spread to run mentality. And I think the only way it would backfire on you is if Sean Payton decides that he's going to be gap sound every single play on defense and not defend the pass and make Kyler Murray beat him. If that's the case, I think that Edmunds could have a worse week. But the trend has been when people have been facing Arizona is that they're defending that spread out 5 wide, 4 wide offense and putting less emphasis on the running back. And I think maybe Chase Edmunds is on people's radars now. Maybe they're going to try and defend him a bit more. But there's really not much you can do other than trot on big nickel or something like that when people spread and force you to defend all quadrants of the field. So I think he's still going to have opportunities there against space, and he's shifty and he's got some juice.
Alex, any interest in the passing game here, potentially as a pivot to Chase Edmunds, and the fact that if we know that he's going to be the starter, you assume you'll see people chasing the points there just because he had 3 touchdowns last week and went nuts. Larry Fitzgerald's been kind of quiet since Christian Kirk went out. I guess any interest at all in Kyler in the passing game?
Man, it's been really hard if you've been stacking Arizona's passing attack recently. Larry Fitzgerald's time on the field has gone down a little bit, and that's made it a little bit trickier to have a number one guy. Last week he ran 22 of 29 passing plays. He ran routes in, which is a lot lower than if you look at the season rate. So, given that they're running four wide receivers a lot of times, that also makes it pretty unappealing to go for a stack here. But if I was going to go to a stack, I might take another shot on Fitzgerald.
All right, that makes sense. And Josh, will ask you too. Anything you're seeing with the Arizona attack here that's changed materially? Obviously, having Christian Kirk not in there, it seems like it's changed the game plan a bit, where they're giving him a lot of short throws, a lot of kind of pick and pop type plays to get him out into space, and everybody's kind of trickled downwards after that. But the run game has become a focus. Would you have any interest at all in the pass game here against New Orleans?
It's still the air raid, so it's still the ability to be explosive from that passing offense is always there. Kyler Murray's getting more and more comfortable in his role. He's running more, and that opens up downfield opportunities. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a week coming up pretty soon here where that entire offense is going to click and things are going to go well. The thing that's really driven this is that, some smart people who I follow on Twitter, like Stephen Ruiz, he's looked at their run game and how creative it's been and the way he's taking advantage of the way defense have been playing them. So I guess that's why I come back to this idea that unless Sean Payton throws him, a monkey wrench in here and really just decides he's going to take away that run game, I think that's where I would put my money on this game again until I see this passing offense really click.
That makes sense. All right, let's keep going here. So here's a game which I think is going to test a lot of our mettle because I think maybe we'll butt some heads on it because this has been a spot where New England's defense, they are facing Cleveland at home this week. New England projects for some ownership with another high implied total for their offensive players. The defense owned a little bit so far. It could come up a bit. But the more important question to me, I think, is the defense. We could talk about the offense in a second, but I want to hit the defense up front. New England's defense scoring a ton, have had 4 games over 25 fantasy points. The coverage has been really good, which kind of makes everything a little bit easier. Baker Mayfield, terrible under pressure this year. This is one of the split things, so I don't want to go too nuts with it. But a high interception rate, a really high sack rate, over 20% when he's being pressured. His QB rating falls off of a cliff. So he's been really bad. And the one thing that New England does time and again and has made poor Sam Darnold see ghosts like he's Pac-Man out there. So Josh, I'll ask you first because this is your wheelhouse. New England's defense, does it matter this week as a high-priced defense going against a really turnover-prone Baker Mayfield?
I just wrote an article on 538. Go check it out on the Patriots defense. They've been incredible. They really have been insane. And but the one kind of chink in their armor is that they're not getting consistent pressure on the quarterback. So if that is Baker Mayfield's kryptonite, they're going to have to manufacture it with blitzes, and they have all year long. I think they're 7th in the league in blitz number of blitzes, and they are actually really, really effective on it. They lead the league in expected points on those blitzes. So if Bill Belichick decides to go crazy and come after Baker, it's not going to be with just 4 down linemen. It's going to be with those blitzes, in my opinion. And if Baker can read them and respond, unlike these rookie quarterbacks and poor Luke Fox of the world that they've faced so far, I think they could end up getting burned. One of the things I talked about in my article is that because they don't, the New England I'm speaking of, because their defense doesn't consistently pressure quarterbacks, they actually have seen the most deep shots against. So teams are teeing off and taking lots and lots of 20 plus air yards passes against them. Unfortunately for those offenses, the throws have come from the arms of guys like Josh Allen, who's horribly inaccurate, and all the rest of the motley crew that they've faced. I think Baker could get right in this game. And I think, especially if they blitz him and he's able to, use his smarts. He is a smart quarterback. He's able to use his smarts and identify where he needs to go on the field. He could really make them pay for being overly aggressive because they aren't manufacturing that pressure. They aren't getting that pressure without manufacturing.
One of his best games of the year, Baker's going against Baltimore, who's another blitz-heavy team, and that was the game he had 342 yards. Didn't have a great output overall, but still a very solid one. Actually, Josh, I'll ask you this then, because you look at similar matchups or something like that, because that is the most limited sample size. But if you see Baker versus a blitz team, a blitz-happy team, and he actually does well if they can just withhold against that pressure, I guess, is that something you would consider into the equation at all?
I mean, again, I think if I was giving advice to someone, I would say no. I mean, like, let's go with the stuff we know is actually predictive. This is just my opinion. And in my opinion is probably, no better than a coin flip. But it is my opinion, and that is the analysis I would provide. It just so happens that I can't tell you how good or bad it is.
Okay, that seems fair. Alex, would you pay up for New England this week? I know it's not a great DFS approach, but when you keep seeing them do that, I think there's some stats about how New England would be one of the top scoring players overall in DFS or in fantasy right now. So how are you feeling about the concept of paying up for New England, just given the struggles we've seen from Cleveland?
I don't like it. I think it's just kind of like that hot hand where they've been getting really, really lucky. We know that top defenses probably average in the high single digits over the course of a season. They've been far exceeding that, and I expect that to be kind of all noise and not really predictive, especially going into a matchup versus a tougher team in the Browns. But I do see a lot of fancy plays in this game. James White seems pretty cheap. If Rex Burkhead continues to be out, then I mean you can just lock him in for really a large number of routes every week, and that really adds up, especially in PPR. Only 5K on DraftKings. It's a competitive game. I think he'll be in there a lot. Edelman, with Josh Gordon out, he should get a little boost because Mohamed Sanu probably doesn't know the playbook enough to play full time this week, and Jacoby Myers isn't really a high volume target guy. So I like Edelman, and then on the other side, I think Nick Chubb is worth some looks because I mean it's kind of like a situation where people might fade it just because New England's been so good on defense, but he's one of those guys that has such a big workload that he's just in play every week. And if the Browns kind of excel and exceed their expectation this week, he could be in line for a high 20s point total.
That makes sense. That would be a good way to get leverage on the people owning that New England defense as well at high ownership. Let's talk about the New England pass game a little bit, Alex, as you did mention James White. Julian Edelman, you would expect to see an uptick. You mentioned that. Philip Dorsett still been in the mix, getting some deep targets. Is this pass game of interest to you, given the fact that it's a really bad total here for the game? Like it does seem, you mentioned that it could be a competitive game, but 13-point spread favoring New England right now, according to at least what I pulled earlier. So how are you feeling about the passing attack overall besides James White? And I guess, is there upside here overall?
Well, the crazy thing is that, I mean, 13-point spread for New England is on the low side for this season. So this is actually one of the most competitive games they've been in, maybe the most. And I think that I think there's definitely a chance for this game to be a good one. And I mean, it's certainly worth some hesitation, but I think that also lines tend to be a little bit skewed towards New England because there's so much public fandom that the money just flows to New England side of the bet and kind of throws it off a little bit.
Josh, how are you feeling about the pass game for New England here? And with the addition of Sanu, I think the assumption is that Sanu will take over some slot routes, but he's probably not there in terms of knowing the whole playbook, and that Edelman will move outside. But what do you think the opportunity is for the Patriots, I guess, in the immediate future right now, this week and moving forward with Sanu in the mix?
They really haven't been great on offense. This is not the Tom Brady-led Patriots we've been used to over the past 10 years or so. This is a team that's been winning with defense. I don't have a huge regard for Cleveland's defense, but they are pretty good. I would say that if it somehow gets into a shootout somehow, some way, Odell Beckham did pop on the list this week. So if he is able to get some looks his way and make some big plays and some shot plays, I think Cleveland has a good shot of winning the game outright. And I don't know in that type of shootout environment that Tom Brady's going to be able to keep up. So I'm not really high on their pass game, at least not right now, until they show a little bit more productivity.
Burying the lead a little bit with the Cleveland might win this one.
Yeah. No, I honestly think this could be one of those shockers, and this could be their first loss of the season. Yeah.
So you're agreeing with Jarvis Landry here?
Did he guarantee it, man? I listened to that. That wasn't a guarantee. That was nonsense.
Okay.
Clickbait headline community probably thought that was a guarantee.
I just read the headline. Guilty.
We work in the media, Alex. You can't fall for clickbait.
You're going to love the top 10 running backs to fade this week.
You'll never believe what these running backs will restore your faith in humanity this week. All right, that's fair. So Cleveland, people a little hotter here, and they did have the bye to prepare. Actually, that's another question, Josh, because you have so much data in your head. I feel like you'll have some reference point for it. Coming off the bye for Cleveland, is that something that gives them a bit of an edge here against New England?
That's a good question. I actually have not looked at performance off of buys. We do see a predictiveness of certain metrics kind of bounce around during the middle part of the season when the bye weeks happen. So maybe there's something there to look at and try and figure out if there's a signal to be teased. But my assumption, just kind of based on my experience, is that it's probably negligible. And we see the same thing with Thursday night performances. There's actually not more injuries. There's performance, speed, all the things that you might look as leading indicators of predictive of production. They're all kind of similar on Thursday night compared to Sunday and Monday Night Football. So anyway, long story short, no, I don't believe coming off a bye is any real help. Perhaps in the playoffs, but other than that first round bye, I don't think it really helps you too much.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I just know you have so much things going on in that beautiful mind of yours that you might have some fun fact. You're like, actually, there's a 10% downgrade every performance coming. Like, oh.
Sadly, no.
Let's keep moving here. A guy we talked about briefly who, Josh, you slandered, but I love the man, Josh Allen, in a nice spot, theoretically going against Philly's secondary, who just gets bombed on time and again. And Buffalo also showed some defensive weaknesses last week against Ryan Fitzpatrick, of all people, and in a revenge game. So I think that's what drove him to success. But Philly at Buffalo, not a great team total here, but two teams that maybe could be fertile to give up some more production and also get some more production on their own. So Alex, I'll ask you first, Philadelphia at Buffalo, is that a game you're interested in at all?
To be honest, Buffalo, a good team, but it's hard for me to get to in DFS because Josh Allen takes a lot of the production, and that makes it hard to get that correlation in your lineup because you got a guy like John Brown is probably the number one. And I feel like he's a little bit overpriced this week, and there really aren't a lot of guys other than him to go to. On Philadelphia's side, Zach Ertz has been kind of underperforming this year, so maybe it'd be kind of a contrarian spend up on him. But other than that, I'm not seeing much in this game.
Josh, any interest at all in this game for you? And the Ertz thing, too, is worth noting. He's probably due for some positive TD regression with Dallas Goedert taking a lot of those off the table at a seemingly unsustainable rate. But any thoughts at all, Josh? Would this be a spot maybe you think Josh Allen can get it done, given just what we've seen from Philly, where they give up multiple 50-yard plays to Stephon Diggs in a game?
Yeah, I think the bottom's going to fall out for Buffalo here pretty quick. Could be this week. So I think Philadelphia's been underperforming. Buffalo's been overperforming. Definitely see this as a week where all that kind of regression could hit. So yeah, so I think that Ertz could be a good guy, but I kind of agree with Alex. I would stay away from this game.
All right, and let's keep going here. I actually forgot to put this on our run sheet, but I'm going to go to it right now because I think this is an important game, given that as the team with the highest implied total of the week, Cincinnati heading into a matchup with the Rams. I believe this is in England. I didn't have it on my sheet, but I believe Alex, that's right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's in England. 30.5 implied points for the Rams. Last week, Jared Goff took none of his targets with him to his decent fantasy day. So that's always a blast when you have a quarterback who does that. And none of his players had value. But of course, Cincinnati, one of the worst run defenses in the league. They gave up a lot to Leonard Fournette. Not a touchdown, but Todd Gurley in another sweet spot. The pass game theoretically could see more production here because Cincinnati also can't defend the pass. They just happen to let teams run on them quite a bit. So Alex, how are you feeling about the Rams? Because the Rams are not really owned, but the highest implied total of the week.
I saw that Todd Gurley was kind of chalky, so I was kind of interested in that. It could be the first week. He makes a nice play on FanDuel, especially where he's 7,400. The game script should set up really well for the Rams rushing attack. But I think playing contrarian and maybe going for a Ram stack with Kupp, Woods, and Cooks could pay off, especially because there are such great options for DFS on the Bengals side.
Josh, how are you feeling about this Rams attack here? The offense should theoretically be able to get on track a little bit more going against Cincinnati, but teams have just passed less against them because they don't really need to. So how are you feeling about the Rams offense overall, and Todd Gurley too?
I think it comes down to whether or not Cincinnati is going to take a page out of everyone else's playbook and take away the wide zone. And if they do, then I don't know that McVay has really found an answer in terms of his scheme to still be effective running the ball when teams, gear up to take that away. He's got to put the ball into Goff's hands, and we've seen that hasn't been terribly effective so far this year. So even a bad team like Cincinnati, maybe they can take away his favorite thing, his outside zone, his wide zone, and then we'll see underperformance from the running back. So that's kind of my thinking, my theory going into the game. I don't really like anything on LA this week. I'm also not a fan of Mixon, so I don't know. Maybe with Gio Bernard, I think I'd pay up for chalk at running back and avoid this game.
How about Tyler Boyd? I'll ask you first, Josh, because Alex has him projected fairly well on one of the better value plays on the slate. He did see 14 targets last week. He has gotten over 10 targets on the year. A player who's getting the volume theoretically, but not really converting much of it to anything of use, just because Andy Dalton's not good. That's an issue too. How are you feeling about Tyler Boyd, Josh?
Yeah, he hasn't popped yet, and so he's not showing up in my model. And I think that doesn't mean he won't be good or he won't have a game that no one saw coming, or at least the numbers didn't see coming. But I'm just wary. This is just one of those games I'm just not too excited about.
Josh, how are you feeling? Not Josh. Alex, how are you feeling about these guys? Because again, Tyler Boyd, he did jump out to me as somebody that projected really well in your models, and somebody who theoretically his price is nice and he's getting the volume, but the Cincinnati team is just hard to trust. So how are you feeling about Boyd's prospects?
Man, I'm just relishing this opportunity to finally be contrarian here, or be contrary, I should say, because I really like the Bengals passing attack this week. I mean, it could come back to bite me again for sure. But I mean, all this has been game flow, but they've only ran the ball 29% of the time so far this season. And when you pass that much, even though it's low efficiency, that equals high yardage and potential for touchdowns. I mean, their team total is only 20, so maybe touchdown potential isn't that high this week. Mm-hmm. But I really like going to a guy like Tyler Boyd. But I also like Auden Tate and Alex Erickson as good plays as well. Just getting a lot of volume. And although they haven't been tremendously efficient, I mean, there's so much variance at the wide receiver position that these guys could easily go over on or under owned just because the Bengals have been so poor on offense.
Erickson, you have a really good projection on him, actually, I'm seeing now. But I mean, he's also got a very low price point, so that's going to help. Are you buying into the Erickson thing? I mean, he exploded last week, but that did seem maybe just more situational thing than anything.
Yeah. I mean, he's gotten 29 targets on 119 routes this year, according to PFF. And to me, that really shows that he's getting a ton of separation and he's worth being targeted. He's been doing stuff with the targets. And he had a huge game last week, so I think that he might not be sneaky, but I'm willing to go to him this week.
All right, and let's go to your guys. Any games that we haven't hit on that you guys want to talk about? But first, actually, Josh, I want to ask you one question. We talked about him briefly before we came on the air, but Christian McCaffrey versus San Francisco. This spot here, San Francisco's defense looking really good on the air, at least, probably not the Patriots in terms of how they're perceived, but I would say right beneath them in terms of the overall thing, just looking at the data, at least that I'm looking at. How are you feeling about McCaffrey's prospects here heading into this matchup at San Francisco?
Well, this is one of those fascinating situations. Like this is, I guess this is a test of defense doesn't matter. He's one of the most, I think he is the most expensive player on the slate. And he's put up the numbers every single week that he's played. So do you ride that? Do you pay up? Do you eat the chalk on McCaffrey, even though he's going up against this big defense? And I say, yes, yeah, absolutely. I believe in the high variance of defense and that a running back like him that gets sustained volume week after week after week in that offense, that there's no way he doesn't put up comparable numbers to what he's done before.
Alex, how are you feeling about McCaffrey here? He's heading back to where he played in college, too, if you want to spin that narrative into some DFS money for yourself. But how are you feeling about McCaffrey's prospects?
I was feeling a little skeptical, but now that I know he played for college, where the game's happening, I'm all in.
Okay, that's all I needed to hear. I mean, look, I'm a USC alum. I have many shameful memories or just really traumatic memories of him gashing us over and over again up in Stanford. So yeah, it's not the best.
I think that McCaffrey is one of those guys that whenever you have such a big role on the team, guys like McCaffrey, like Bell, like Fournette, that means if a team overexceeds their expectation, they're going to be in for a huge performance. And Carolina is only projected for 18 points this week, but if they win this game versus San Francisco, which is certainly possible, it's about a 1 in 3 chance. Then you're gonna have to bet McCaffrey had a huge game.
All right, and Alex, any other games that we haven't hit on that you feel like are worth touching on before we go to the contrarian plays of the week and the fade of the week?
I'd say Tampa Bay. Like Tampa is playing against Tennessee. I think this game will be under the radar to some extent because the guys are expensive. But I think that it could make a lot of sense to go for a Jameis Winston stack just because we know that he throws the ball a ton and that could equal a big performance. And I think he's going to be really low owned. He's only 3% owned this week.
Josh, do you have any interest in this game at all? I know there's been some hipster NFL talk about Ryan Tannehill maybe being useful. I think the bottom falls out for him this week, but not a bad total. So any interest in this game for Tampa or Tennessee?
Yeah, like Mike Evans again. Back in week 3, he hit big, and I think he's in line for that. He's actually had more opportunity in that offense than Chris Godwin over the past 3 or 4 weeks. So that's wild to me. He hasn't put up the points. Obviously, Godwin is just a touchdown machine, although he hasn't been again just recently. So I think, I think I would definitely put some money down on Evans and throw him in a bunch of lineups, especially in GPPs.
All right, let's go to our final picks here. And of course, thank you again to FantasyDraft, the official home of rake-free DFS. Please go to there right now. Go to FantasyDraft.com. Use the promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, for your free 7-day trial and your entry into the world of rake-free DFS, which is really all you need in life. And hit that like button as well, because the picks, again, only as good as the amount of likes we get. And these are the contrarian picks. They are the tough ones. So, Alex, I'll start with you first. Contrarian QB pick. Who would it be?
Well, I mentioned Winston. That's someone I like, but one guy that I might have to dig in my heels here. Go for Andy Dalton. He just throws the ball so much. It's bound to work out one week, and I'll be damned if I don't have him that week.
Josh, how are you feeling about QB? Who'd be your contrarian QB pick?
That's amazing. I'll go bounce back game for Sam Darnold.
Oh, okay. He's maybe less ghosts out there in the air this week for him in Jacksonville. I'll go to Mitchell Trubisky. I like the spot going against the Chargers. We saw that Tannehill got really well against them last week, and this could be another get well spot for Mitch. So I'm sorry if to bring up any traumatic memories for you, Alex, but Mitchell Trubisky will be my contrarian QB pick. Josh, who would be your contrarian running back pick?
Yeah, this is a good question. So I was looking these over just earlier, and I think I might stack Le'Veon Bell with Sam Darnold. I think that these guys are gonna get well. I think that the recency bias is really heavy against Jets after being on the national stage and crapping the sheets, and so I think they're gonna get right. I think it's gonna go through Le'Veon Bell because he's been their most reliable player on offense. And so he would be my contrarian play.
I love how you're going on the contrary and you're bringing the Jets and the Browns. So you're fully embracing the ethos we have here. Alex, how about you? Who'd be your contrarian running back pick?
I'm going to go to Austin Eckler here. He's someone who's gotten a big price discount because Melvin Gordon's back. He's getting less of a workload. But the conventional wisdom is that Melvin Gordon has been really underperforming. And I expect that if that continues indefinitely, he will be benched at some point, and Eckler will get more workload than expected. So I think he makes a nice contrarian play.
All right, and I'm going to go to Marlene Mac. I thought it was interesting last week. They didn't go to him. They knew Houston was going to really try to sell out to defend the run. I think this is the kind of match where Marlene Mac thrives, kind of smash mouth one. So I'm intrigued by him at very low ownership this week, it looks like, and a reasonable price. How about contrarian wide receiver pick for you, Alex?
I'll go with DJ Moore. I think this Carolina offense is going to be pretty much avoided, or if people take it, it'll be McCaffrey. I think that Moore and Samuel will go under the radar. Moore has seen his price kind of at a low point at $4,900 on DraftKings, $9,100 on FantasyDraft is especially appealing. and he gets targeted a lot. He's targeted at a 20% rate when he runs a route. He's out there for most of the game, so that makes a really nice play.
Josh, how about you? Contrarian wide receiver pick.
Yeah, so contrarian wide receiver, I'll pick a guy from the buy low model, and actually Evan Silva's been giving me some crap about this guy. He says it's my new Kelvin Benjamin. I disagree. I think Mike Williams is going to pop. I think this is finally going to be his week. It's his third straight week at the top of the buy low list. He's cheap, $4,000. His opportunity's worth at least 13, 14 points a game. He just hasn't been meeting it. Missed touchdown last week. Rivers threw it over his head. I think like 4 yards. He was in the end zone. So look, variance is gonna go to his side soon. It's not like he's got a nonsense horrible quarterback throwing to him. It's not like he doesn't have another wideout on the other side of the field who has been good. Although is Keenan Allen, is he hurt? Anyway,
he's questionable now, but yeah, I don't know.
Questionable. Yeah, so if Keenan Allen starts, I think chances are pretty good that Mike Williams has a bounce back game.
It probably helps that unlike Kelvin Benjamin, Mike Williams not built like an overweight tight end, so that's gonna do him some favors. Right. I'll go with Golden Tate for mine. Golden Tate revenge game in Detroit, but also I just think it's a nice spot here. Detroit, I think, will give up some stuff over the middle. They've given up passing production to a lot of teams, and I'm intrigued by the concept of him at just about 5% ownership on DK. And here's the tough spot, Alex, the one that sometimes bites us in the nards. Fade of the week. Who's going to be for you, Alex?
I think I'll take a bold stand here. I'll just go for the most popular guy of the week, DeAndre Hopkins. I think that Will Fuller being out doesn't move the needle that much. Kenny Stills should come in and place him to a large extent, as we discussed previously, and they got Kuti kind of being the wide receiver 3 who gets targeted a decent amount. So I think the matchup's decent versus Oakland, but if he's going to be the most popular player of the week, I'm fine with leaving him off my roster.
Josh, who'd be your fade of the week? Fade of the week. I'm gonna go ahead and go against all the chalk, and I'm gonna pull this thing up again here. You guys have DeAndre Hopkins as your number one owned wide receiver, and I think that he's actually going to be one of the guys that's going to have one of those down performances where everyone thinks he's going to be good, and if anything happens in that game that's going to be lights out, it'll probably be going to Kenny Stills. So I'd be fading DeAndre Hopkins at 8,100.
And for the reasons that you guys helpfully gave me earlier, I'm going to go Ty Johnson. Just I feel like you guys made great cases. And if we're wrong, it's because you guys were wrong. That's what I want. Josh, we always like to turn over the floor to our guests here because you guys do such a great job for us all the time to plug anything you want. You're doing great work at 538. Your Twitter handle at Frisco Josh. But what else do you want to plug right now that's in your world?
Well, 538 definitely established the run. Follow me on Twitter if you like getting trolled, and during games if you like reading ridiculous jokes about the announcing and whatever else is on my mind. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, go follow at Frisco Josh. And sorry, Alex, the floor is yours now.
Who doesn't love that? I'll definitely be reading every tweet you send out here. Just thanks to everyone for watching again. And one thing we discussed before the show, me and Chris, is that make sure to build a roster with all of our fades of the week to hedge, because we're often wrong on those. But our contrarian plays go off at a decent clip. And thanks FantasyDraft once again for sponsoring the show. Definitely my favorite place to play DFS because you just win more money when you win, and that's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Hit that like button before you go. Thank you, Josh, for being on the show, and we'll be back with you guys next week for On the Contrary. So stay tuned. Got a ton of NBA content coming up on the channel, so keep your eyes peeled. But thank you guys for watching, and good luck.